The girl was the kind of child most people did not notice. She sat near the back of the classroom, her hands folded, her eyes often lowered. She was not loud, not playful, and not the kind who raised her hand to speak. If someone asked her a question, she answered softly and quickly, as if afraid her voice might take up too much space. Many teachers mistook her silence for weakness, and many students thought she had nothing special inside her. Her life at school felt small. The walls were covered with colorful posters and rules written in bold letters, but none of that made her feel welcome. She followed every rule, arrived on time, and completed her work, yet she was rarely praised. When teachers looked at her, they saw a quiet child who blended into the background. No one guessed that her silence was not empty. It was full of thoughts, memories, and music. At home, her world was different. Their house was simple, with worn furniture and soft light coming through old curtains. In the corner of the living room stood an old piano. Some keys were chipped, and others had lost their shine. But to her, it was the most important thing in the room. She did not remember a time when the piano was not part of her life. It had been there through quiet mornings and long evenings, through happy moments and painful ones. She never told anyone at school about the piano. Not because she was ashamed, but because it felt private. When she sat in front of the keys, the world became quiet in a way that felt safe. She played when no one was watching, letting her fingers move freely. The piano listened without judging her. It never rushed her or told her she was not good enough. It allowed her to be herself. Her family did not have much, but they respected her love for music. They never pushed her to perform or show her skill. They understood that playing the piano was not about attention for her. It was about peace. Some evenings, when the house was silent, she played softly, filling the room with gentle sounds. Those moments made her feel strong, even if she did not know how to explain that feeling. At school, there was a teacher who believed discipline was the most important thing in life. This teacher spoke loudly, walked quickly, and expected students to be confident and bold. Silence, in the teacher's eyes, was a sign of fear or laziness. When the teacher noticed the quiet girl sitting alone, never volunteering, never showing excitement, a certain idea formed. The teacher believed the girl needed to be pushed, even if it hurt. During lessons, the teacher often looked at her with a sharp expression. Questions were asked suddenly, and when she answered softly, the teacher sighed. Sometimes the teacher spoke about how students needed to be brave and stop hiding. Each time those words were spoken, the girl felt smaller in her seat. She wished she could disappear into the chair, unnoticed. Music class was especially hard for her. The room was large, with instruments lined against the walls. There was a piano at the front, polished and clean, very different from the one at home. Students took turns clapping rhythms or singing simple lines. The girl listened closely, but she never joined unless she was told to. Her heart beat faster whenever music was involved, not from fear of music, but from fear of being seen. The teacher noticed this. The teacher noticed how her eyes followed the piano, how her fingers moved slightly as if remembering something. Instead of seeing this as interest, the teacher saw it as hesitation. The idea grew stronger. The teacher decided that one day, the girl would be forced to face her fear in front of everyone. The girl did not know this. She only felt a heavy feeling whenever she entered that classroom. She sensed that attention was coming, unwanted and sharp. Still, she kept her head down and focused on getting through each day. She believed that if she stayed quiet long enough, people would leave her alone. One afternoon, the school prepared for a small gathering. It was not a big event, just a simple program where students would show small skills. Parents were not invited, but teachers and students from other classes would attend. The atmosphere in the school changed. Students talked excitedly about who would sing or speak. The girl listened but said nothing. She had no plans to perform. She hoped no one would notice her. The teacher, however, had already made a decision. During class, the teacher spoke loudly about confidence and courage. Then the teacher's eyes landed on the girl. A smile appeared, but it did not feel kind. It felt heavy. The teacher announced that sometimes the best lessons came from surprise. The girl felt her stomach tighten. She did not know why, but her hands became cold. She looked at the floor, hoping not to be called. Around her, students whispered and laughed softly, enjoying the tension in the room. They did not mean harm, but they were curious. They wanted to see what would happen. The teacher said her turn would come during the gathering. No explanation was given. The girl wanted to ask what that meant, but the words stayed trapped in her throat. She nodded quietly and returned to her seat, her heart racing. The rest of the day passed slowly. Each minute felt longer than the last. When she returned home, the piano waited in its usual place. She sat down and played without thinking. The music came out deeper than usual, filled with feelings she could not name. Her fingers shook at first, then steadied. For a moment the fear faded. The piano reminded her who she was when no one was watching. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the teacher's smile and the unknown task waiting for her. She did not know that her quiet world was about to be shaken. She did not know that the piano, which had always been her private friend, would soon speak for her in a place where silence ruled. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. And somewhere inside her, beneath all the fear, something strong was waiting to be heard. The next day arrived faster than she expected. Morning light slipped through the window, and for a moment, she stayed in bed, hoping it was still night. Her chest felt tight, and her thoughts were heavy. The memory of the teacher's voice and that sharp smile returned the moment she opened her eyes. Whatever was planned for her, she knew it would not be gentle. She got ready quietly and walked to school with slow steps. Every sound around her felt louder than usual. The bell ringing, students talking, shoes scraping the floor. It all made her feel small. She kept her eyes down and went to her seat like she always did. Her classmates were excited about the gathering later in the day. They talked about who might sing or perform a short act. She listened but said nothing. During lessons, the teacher kept glancing in her direction. Each time their eyes met, she felt a chill run through her. The teacher spoke again about confidence and facing fears. The words were said loudly, almost proudly, as if this lesson was meant for someone specific. She knew it was meant for her. As the hours passed, her hands grew cold. She tried to focus on her work, but the letters on the page blurred together. Her heart beat faster with every passing minute. She wondered if she should tell someone she was scared, but she did not know who would listen. Asking for help had never been easy for her. When the time for the gathering finally came, students were asked to line up and walk into the larger hall. The room felt different from the classroom. It was open, bright, and filled with noise. Chairs were arranged in rows. Teachers stood near the walls, talking among themselves. The piano sat at the front of the room, silent and shining under the lights. She felt her breath catch when she saw it. This piano was bigger and newer than the one at home. It looked strong and important. Being near it made her nervous, but also strangely calm. Music had always done that to her. Still, today, the piano did not feel like a safe place. Felt like a stage. Students took their seats, laughing and whispering. Some pointed toward the piano, guessing who might play. She tried to make herself invisible. She sat still, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her legs felt weak. She kept telling herself that maybe the teacher had changed their mind. The gathering began with simple performances. One student recited a short poem. Another sang a song, missing a few notes but smiling proudly. Everyone clapped. The mood in the room was light and playful. She watched quietly, clapping softly like everyone else. Her turn, if it was coming, had not come yet. Then the teacher stepped forward. The room slowly became quiet. The teacher spoke about learning through experience and how fear could only be beaten by facing it. The words sounded serious, almost dramatic. As the teacher spoke, their eyes searched the crowd and finally landed on her. Her heart dropped. The teacher called her forward. Not gently, not kindly. The voice was firm and loud enough for everyone to hear. A few students gasped. Others smiled, curious to see what would happen. She froze for a moment, unable to move. Her legs felt heavy, like they no longer belonged to her. The teacher repeated her name. She stood up slowly. Every step toward the front felt like walking through deep water. She could feel eyes on her from all directions. Some were confused, some amused, some kind, and some simply watching. When she reached the front, the teacher gestured toward the piano. The words that followed were sharp. The teacher said it was time for her to stop hiding. Said it was time for her to show something. Anything. There was no question asked. There was no choice given. A few students laughed quietly, not because they hated her, but because the situation felt awkward and strange. The laughter still hurt. It made her cheeks burn and her throat tighten. She wanted to run back to her seat. She wanted to disappear. She looked at the piano. For a brief moment, she remembered the old one at home. The chipped keys. The quiet evenings. The safety. This piano felt different, but it was still a piano. It still spoke the same language. The teacher told her to sit and play. The words were said like an order. Her hands trembled as she lowered herself onto the bench. The room was silent now. Even the whispers had stopped. Everyone was waiting. She placed her hands above the keys but did not touch them yet. Her fingers hovered in the air, shaking slightly. Her mind was loud with fear. What if she failed? What if she embarrassed herself? What if the teacher was right about her? She closed her eyes for a second and took a slow breath. In that small moment, she imagined herself at home. She imagined the quiet room, the soft light, and the familiar sound of keys beneath her fingers. The noise of the hall faded, just a little. Her fingers finally touched the piano. The first note came out soft, almost too soft. A few people leaned forward, trying to hear. The teacher's face showed surprise, not because the note was wrong, but because it was careful, controlled. She played another note, then another. Slowly, a simple melody began to form. It was not loud or flashy. It was gentle and honest. The sound filled the room in a way no one expected. Students stopped shifting in their seats. Teachers along the walls turned their heads. The laughter was gone. The room grew still. She was still afraid, but something else was growing inside her now. Focus, memory, feeling. Her hands moved with more confidence, guided by years of quiet practice no one had seen. The teacher stood frozen. This was not the failure that had been expected. This was something else entirely. As the melody continued, the girl forgot about the eyes watching her. She forgot about the hall. She forgot about the fear. All that remained was the piano and the story her fingers were beginning to tell. And without realizing it, she had already started to change the room. The melody grew slowly, like a quiet sunrise. Each note followed the next with care, as if she was walking across thin ice, testing every step. At first, her shoulders were tight, and her breathing was uneven. But the piano answered her gently, just like the one at home. It did not rush her. It did not judge her. It simply waited for her hands to speak. The room felt different now. The air seemed heavier, but calmer. Students who had been smiling moments ago sat still, their faces serious. A few leaned forward without realizing it. Teachers along the walls stopped whispering. Even the smallest sounds, a cough or a chair moving, felt too loud against the soft music. Her fingers moved with memory, not thought. She did not remember when she had learned this piece or how many times she had played something like it. She only knew how it felt. The music carried pieces of her life, though no one else knew that. It carried quiet evenings, lonely afternoons, and moments when the world felt too loud, and she needed a place to hide. As she played, her fear slowly loosened its grip. Her hands stopped shaking. Her back straightened. The notes became clearer, stronger. She began to trust herself. Each sound filled the room, gentle but confident, like a voice that had waited a long time to be heard. The teacher watched closely, eyes wide with disbelief. This was not what had been expected. There was no mistake, no wrong note, no sign of panic. Instead, there was control, feeling, depth. The teacher's expression changed from firm confidence to something uncertain, something uncomfortable. The girl did not see this. She was somewhere else now. The hall faded into the background. The lights above her blurred softly. All she could feel was the piano beneath her fingers and the steady rhythm inside her chest. Her breathing slowed, matching the flow of the music. She moved into a new part of the piece, one that rose gently, like a question being asked. The notes climbed higher, brighter. The sound grew fuller, filling every corner of the hall. It was still soft, still careful, but now there was courage in it. Students exchanged glances. Some felt a tight feeling in their throats. Others felt goosebumps rise on their arms. No one laughed now. No one whispered. The girl they had barely noticed before was holding their attention without trying. In the back of the room, a teacher folded their arms and nodded slowly. Another pressed their lips together, surprised. No one had known this child carried such ability. No one had bothered to ask. Her fingers danced across the keys, not fast, not slow, but steady. Every movement felt natural. Years of quiet practice showed in the way she handled the piano. She knew when to pause, when to soften the sound, when to let a note linger just a little longer. The music changed again, this time becoming deeper. The tone shifted, like a shadow passing over sunlight, felt heavier, filled with emotion that was hard to name. Sadness, maybe, or longing, or strength born from being unseen for too long. A few students lowered their heads, listening closely. One wiped their eyes quickly, hoping no one noticed. The music did not shout its feelings. It shared them quietly, honestly. The teacher at the front stood still, arms at their sides. The plan to embarrass her had fallen apart completely. The room was no longer under the teacher's control. The piano had taken over and the girl with it. Her confidence grew with each passing second. She was no longer playing to survive the moment. She was playing because she needed to, because the music was part of her, because it was finally allowed to exist outside her small, quiet home. Her hands moved faster now, but never wildly. The notes flowed like water, smooth and connected. The melody rose and fell, telling a story without words. A story of being small, of being ignored, of finding strength in silence. Time seemed to stretch. No one knew how long she had been playing. Could have been minutes or hours. No one checked the clock. No one looked away. The girl's face remained calm, but her eyes were closed now. She trusted her hands completely. The piano responded with warmth, each note landing exactly where it should. The hall felt alive with sound. Then, slowly, the music began to soften. The melody returned to where it had started, quieter, gentler. Felt like a deep breath being released after holding it for too long. Her fingers slowed. The notes became fewer, spaced carefully apart. The final part of the piece felt personal, almost private. It was the kind of ending she usually played when she was alone, when no one else could hear. A soft goodbye. Promise kept. She played the last note and let it fade naturally. She did not rush to lift her hands. She stayed still, allowing the sound to disappear on its own. The room remained silent. No one clapped. No one moved. The silence was heavy, not awkward, but full. It held respect, shock, and something close to wonder. The girl slowly opened her eyes. For the first time since she had been called forward, she looked out at the room. Faces stared back at her. Changed. Softer. Quieter. Different. She stood up carefully and stepped away from the piano. Her legs felt weak again, but this time it was not from fear. It was from release. The teacher finally shifted, swallowing hard. The lesson that had been planned was gone. Something far more powerful had taken its place. And in that moment, the girl was no longer invisible. The silence after the last note felt longer than the music itself. It stretched across the room, heavy but gentle, like everyone was afraid to break it. The girl stood near the piano, her hands resting at her sides. Her fingers still felt warm, as if the keys had left their mark on her. She did not know what to do next. She waited. Then someone in the back slowly began to clap. It was hesitant at first, just two hands coming together softly. Another followed. Then another. The sound grew, spreading through the room until the hall filled with applause. It was not loud or wild. It was steady, honest, and full. The girl flinched slightly at the sound. She was not used to attention. Her heart began to race again, but this time it felt different. It was not fear. It was something close to relief. She looked down, unsure where to place her eyes. Her face felt warm, and she pressed her lips together, trying to stay calm. Students who had laughed earlier now clapped with serious faces. Some smiled softly. Others looked stunned, as if they were still trying to understand what they had just heard. A few whispered to each other, but their voices were low and respectful. Teachers along the walls joined in. Some nodded slowly, impressed. Others looked thoughtful, as if realizing something important about the child they had never truly seen. The sound of clapping filled every corner of the room. The teacher at the front did not clap at first. The teacher stood still, eyes fixed on the girl. The confident posture from earlier was gone. The moment had slipped out of control, and the truth was impossible to ignore. This child had not needed forcing. She had needed space. The applause slowly faded. The room became quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It felt warm instead of tense. The teacher cleared their throat and finally spoke. The voice sounded different, lower, less certain. The teacher said the girl had done well. The words were simple, but they carried weight. There was no excuse offered, no long speech. Just a short sentence that felt heavy with meaning. The girl nodded politely. She did not smile, but her shoulders relaxed a little. She returned to her seat, walking slowly, as if her legs were unsure how to carry her after what had just happened. As she passed by other students, a few moved their feet to give her space. One student whispered that she was amazing. Another gave a small thumbs up. She did not respond, but she heard them. When she sat down, her hands rested in her lap. They were still trembling, but she did not hide them. She let the feeling pass through her. The gathering continued, but nothing felt the same. Other performances followed, but the energy had changed. People listened more closely. They clapped kindly. The mood was softer, more thoughtful. It was as if the room had learned something together. The teacher kept glancing in her direction. Not with frustration or judgment, but with something closer to regret. The idea of using embarrassment as a lesson now felt wrong. Very wrong. When the gathering finally ended, students were asked to return to their classrooms. The hall slowly emptied. The girl stood and joined the line, her mind still buzzing. She felt tired, but lighter, like something heavy had been set down. In the hallway, a few students walked beside her. One asked how long she had been playing. She shrugged gently and said she had played for a long time. Another said they wished they could play like that. She smiled softly, a small, shy smile that appeared and disappeared quickly. Back in the classroom, the teacher asked everyone to take their seats. The room was quiet. The teacher stood at the front, hands resting on the desk. There was a pause before speaking. The teacher talked about respect, about how talent could appear in unexpected places, about how pushing someone the wrong way could cause harm. The words were careful, chosen slowly. The girl listened, unsure if the speech was meant for her or for the teacher. The teacher then asked her to stay after class. Her stomach tightened again. Old fear returned for a moment. She nodded quietly and stayed in her seat while the others packed up and left. Some looked back at her with curiosity. One smiled before walking out. When the room was empty, the teacher sat down across from her. The silence between them felt awkward. The teacher spoke first, saying that what happened earlier had not gone as planned. The words were honest, though still careful. The teacher admitted that the intention had been to push her out of her shell, but that it had been handled badly. The word sorry did not come easily, but the meaning was there. The teacher said it should never have been done that way. The girl listened without interrupting. She kept her eyes on the desk, tracing a small scratch with her finger. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. She said she liked playing the piano, but she did not like being forced. The words were simple, but they carried courage. The teacher nodded. For the first time, the power in the room felt balanced. The teacher thanked her for being honest. When the girl left the classroom, the hallway felt brighter. The sounds around her felt less sharp. She walked home slowly, letting the cool air clear her thoughts. At home, she sat at the old piano. The keys looked the same as always, chipped and familiar. She placed her hands on them and played a few quiet notes. The music felt different now. Stronger, freer. She realized that something had changed, not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. She was still quiet. She still liked being alone with her music. But she no longer felt invisible. The piano at school had spoken for her, but now, even without it, she knew her voice mattered. And though the day had begun with fear, it ended with understanding, leaving a mark that would not fade quickly. The days after the gathering felt quieter, but not empty. When the girl returned to school, she noticed small changes right away. The hallway sounded the same, the bells rang on time, and the classrooms smelled like old books and chalk. Yet something inside her had shifted. She walked with the same soft steps, but her shoulders were no longer curled inward. She felt steadier, like she knew where her feet belonged. Some students looked at her differently now. Not all of them spoke to her, and that was fine. She did not need attention from everyone. A few offered shy smiles as they passed. One asked if she would play again sometime. She answered quietly, saying maybe. That single word felt bigger than it used to. In class, the teacher spoke to her more carefully. Questions were asked without sharpness. When she answered, even softly, the teacher listened. It was not perfect, and it did not change overnight, but respect had entered the space where judgment once lived. Music class felt different too. The piano still sat at the front of the room, polished and bright. It no longer felt like a threat, felt like an option. Sometimes the teacher asked if anyone wanted to try playing. The girl stayed in her seat, not because she was afraid, but because she understood something new. She did not owe the room her music. At home, the old piano waited like always. She continued to play in the evenings, but now her music carried new feelings. There was still calm, still softness, but there was also confidence. Her fingers pressed the keys with trust, not doubt. She explored new sounds, letting herself make mistakes without fear. Her family noticed the change. They did not ask many questions. They simply listened. One evening, after she finished playing, someone quietly told her the music sounded stronger. She nodded, unsure how to explain that strength had been inside her all along. It had only needed a moment to breathe. As weeks passed, the story of the gathering slowly faded into memory for others, but not for her. She remembered it when she felt nervous. She remembered it when she doubted herself. It reminded her that fear did not define her. Silence did not mean emptiness. One afternoon, the school announced another small event. Nothing fancy, just a simple program. Students could volunteer to share something they enjoyed. The teacher made it clear that participation was a choice. No one would be forced. The girl listened from her seat. Her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from thought. She did not raise her hand that day. She went home and played the piano instead, letting the idea sit quietly in her mind. A few days later, she raised her hand. The room did not react loudly. No one gasped or laughed. The teacher nodded and wrote her name down. That was all. The girl lowered her hand and returned to her work, her heart steady. When the day of the event arrived, the hall felt familiar but no longer heavy. She walked to the piano calmly. There was no rush, no pressure, just choice. She sat down and placed her hands on the keys. Before playing, she looked out at the room, not searching for approval, just present. She played something simple, something honest. The notes flowed easily, filling the space without trying to impress. When she finished, the applause came naturally, felt warm, not overwhelming. She stood and returned to her seat with a small smile. This time it stayed. After the event, the teacher thanked her for sharing. The words felt genuine. The girl nodded and went on with her day. Life did not suddenly become perfect. She was still quiet. She still preferred listening over speaking. But she no longer felt small. She understood now that talent did not need permission to exist. It did not need to be loud or forced into the light. It only needed respect. The piano would always be part of her life, whether on a stage or in a quiet room. It was not just an instrument. It was a voice. And she had learned, in the most unexpected way, that her voice mattered. The teacher had tried to humiliate her. Instead, the moment had revealed a truth no one could ignore. Sometimes the quietest people carry the strongest stories. And when they finally choose to be heard, the world listens.